I'm now starting the recorded service, so please be aware that this session is being recorded. Welcome, everyone. This is the kickoff webinar of the Smart Grid Educational Series. I have been communicating with you over the past few weeks to inform you about this free public service that I'm offering that will allow people both in the public and private sector to bring issues about electric sector to the attention of the various industry stakeholders with the aim of getting greater cooperation and collaboration from these stakeholders and maintain this two-way information flow. We talk a lot about two-way electricity flow, but I think that along with that, we will also need plenty of two-way information flow. So keeping that in mind, I have put this forum together, and we will be having speakers from the various stakeholder groups who are going to be talking about these critical issues. So we are very pleased today to have the Honorable William Bryan, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Department of Energy in the Infrastructure Security and Energy Restoration. He has his team together today to provide you an overview of these various activities that are going on in the Department of Energy, and he will start with his comments first. So I would like to now pass the microphone over to Deputy Assistant Secretary William Bryan. Bill?
Thank you, Erfan, and thanks to all of you for your interest in joining this inaugural session. I do want to briefly introduce my team of speakers today. On my right here, I have Matthew Light, and he's going to be talking about our risk management process guidelines. I also have Anthony Lucas talking about our emergency preparedness, response, and restoration activities within our office. Rhonda Dunphy to talk about Smart Grid Cybersecurity Specialist Certification Guidelines. And Akhilesh Kashiva, affectionately known in our office as AK, he will be talking about Smart Grid Investment Grants. And I know the topic of the session is on a Smart Grid Educational Series webinar. And although we'll have some discussion on the smart grids referring to the grants that I just talked about, we have the privilege of being the inaugural group to kind of take it in a little bit different direction. And after talking with Erfan, we decided that I think it would be good to set the stage, at least for our office, and how we define security. And everything that we do in this area fits into how we would define security. And I'm going to define that for you now. And in this office, we define security as reliability, survivability, and resiliency. Reliability is all those activities that are taking place before an event occurs, and that can be any kind of natural or man-made event. What are we doing to maintain a steady state? The second piece in how we define security is on survivability. How does a site or how does a system maintain itself during an event? How well is it protected? And then the third piece of that is resiliency. How quickly can the system be up and running again? It can be a site or it can be a system. Within our office, we tend to focus more on the systems approach to an all hazards event. And I will add also, for those of you who have questions, and I know you're sending your questions in, we will address questions after each speaker for a brief period of time. And then at the end, if we have any time left over at the end, we will go back and revisit any questions that aren't captured. So getting back to the point about all hazards, we do look at all hazards, and we also look at it in the context of electricity, oil, and gas. Our office does not do nuclear, although we concern ourselves with the energy produced from nuclear as well as dams. That is not the specialty in our office. I will say that we work in a voluntary relationship with industry. We are, if you understand the National Infrastructure Protection Plan and all the 17 national sectors, we are the sector-specific agency for the energy sector, which is comprised of an electricity subsector and also an oil and natural gas subsector. within that. And we value that voluntary relationship with industry. We have no regulatory role here. It is our view that if you're looking for solutions and you go to a regulator, you're going to get a regulatory solution. You get regulations. If you go to a legislator, you're going to get legislative solutions. But for us in the interagency, we look at participation and try to do as much as we can on a voluntary basis. And then if we need regulation, which there is a place for, or we need regulation or legislation, I should say, then we want to do that smartly. And that should be more of a gap filler instead of the first course of action. All the presentations you're going to hear today really focus on promoting tools or capabilities or processes that will ultimately contribute to a more reliable, survivable, and resilient energy infrastructure. So having said that as a brief introduction, I would like to now turn it over to the speakers and hopefully have a little more time for questions that should surface. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Light to talk about our risk management process guidelines. So Matt, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Bill. Good afternoon. My name is Matt Light. I'm the project manager for the electricity sector cybersecurity risk management process guideline. We call it RMP for short. So I'm going to provide an overview of the initiative, what it's about, how it was started, and then at the end an update on the progress of the initiative. So setting the stage, this all started a little over a year ago in DOE and looking at the challenges that the sector face in the arena of cybersecurity, and recognizing that there's a large number of diverse stakeholders, both within the industry and more broadly across the interagency, federal government, state government, and others, that there was no consistent expectations or objectives across the cybersecurity landscape. So you have a lot of different folks involved in the effort, but there was no consistency across them all. And the understanding of the actual operations and cybersecurity in general varied substantially across all these various stakeholders. At the same time, you have an increase in the amount of digital technologies being implemented across the grid. And the grid has always had a pretty significant amount of, industrial control systems and others, but we started to see the convergence of what you consider, your standard IT capabilities also being applied, and the rollout of smart meters, this merging of IT and ICS, additional sensing and monitoring that's been deployed, really led to has really created a new landscape out there. And thus the cybersecurity landscape has also changed. And so there was a recognition early on that this needed to be addressed. Something needed to be done to allow all the stakeholders to be able to better address cybersecurity. So given that, a team of DOE, like I said, about a year ago or so, identified this challenge and began to develop an approach to address it. And, thank you. And they identified a need for a consistent, repeatable, and adaptable process for risk management across the entire sector. And there are a couple key terms there. One of the major philosophies of the team is that there's no one-size-fits-all. As previously discussed under challenges, the sector is very diverse. And so trying to apply a one-size-fits-all methodology just wouldn't be feasible. It wouldn't work, and it wouldn't lead to secure systems. So it had to be adaptable and scalable so that any size or type of organization could implement it. But at the same time, we wanted something at a high level that was consistent and repeatable so that all of the organizations were functioning off of the same general framework. These are some of the guiding principles that were implemented during the initial development stage of the process. It also recognizes organizational constraints, such as resources, personnel, policies. It recognizes all the different elements within the landscape, including regulation, and doesn't treat it as special, but merely treats it as an input to the process that may or may not be applicable in certain situations. And it also, the goal of the process, too, is also to identify ownership of risk within the organization and make it a little more clear as to exactly where the risks lie within the organization, who's responsible for that risk. So the team wasn't starting from a blank slate. They knew that there was a large amount of documentation and guidance already out there. One of the principal guidance documents came from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, and Special Publications 839, Managing Information Security Risk, was identified as a key starting document. And so that document became kind of the foundation for what we developed. And we tried to take what many considered to be a fairly academic document and operationalize it, look at it for a very specific sector, and adapt that document to meet the needs of the sector.
Matthew?
So, yes.
Yes, you'd have to advance the slides as the presenter. I'm not moving those slides. So if you want me to,
we had that.
Yeah, the top left and right arrows that you see.
We are doing that. Are you not seeing it change?
No.
I have been advancing the slides.
Oh, yeah, that's, I have to move. Okay, yes, the glitch is on my end. I apologize. The privilege got shifted back to me for presenter. So, okay, there we go. So, okay. Yes, I apologize. I just got a note.
Yeah. Sorry, on our end, we were
I thought they were introductory comments. Thank you.
So we're on slide 3 there, yes, the RMP Initiative.
Yeah, you may want to just go back and show the first 2 slides and then come back to this. Thanks.
Okay, so I've already gone through a bit of the challenge and the diversity across all the stakeholders and the changing landscape within industry. And then I went through some of the principles that we used in developing the guideline, and this is the approach that the team took and some of our guiding philosophies as we move forward. So now, it was about spring of last year, the RMP team was actually formed. It's a public-private partnership, as many of our projects are. We brought in industry representatives, as well as folks from across the interagency. We partnered specifically with NIST and NERC. NIST because of the expertise that they brought from developing 839, and NERC for their involvement with the private sector and industry and managing the bulk power system. So we brought in representatives from all those. We utilized some of the associations that we deal with on a regular basis, including APPA, EEI, and NRECA, to bring in a diverse field of expertise and try and, again, be representative of the diversity within industry. So we wanted to make sure that we captured public power, the investor-owned utilities, as well as rural electrics and cooperatives. So you can see there we also leveraged SGIP and CSWG, and DHS, of course, has partnered with us as the principal federal agency for overall cybersecurity. And again, the subject matter expert team is composed mainly of utility representatives, many of whom have a lot of experience with cybersecurity and implementing cybersecurity within their own organizations. So next slide, looking at the actual process, and I just want to provide a very high-level overview. This is by no means going to get into the details of what's been developed. Right now, the document is a pretty manageable 50 pages or so, and goes through in much more detail what needs to be done. But we came up with a pretty broad framework, and that's what's outlined on this slide. So starting off with the cycle there on the left-hand side, you'll see we utilized a 4-step process, and again, a lot of this is captured in NIST Special Publications 839. But we looked at a 4-step process of frame, assess, respond, and monitor. And these are the steps that the organization takes. And then we applied it to the pyramid on the right. And the pyramid at the right we refer to as the risk management model. And it's really a representation of the organization. And again, it can be applied to any type of organization of any size. It's very generic, but we felt it was important to recognize the 3 principal aspects of any organization. So at Tier 1, you have the high-level organizational leadership. At Tier 2, that's where we captured the actual mission and business process and the owners of those mission and business processes. And then Tier 3 is oftentimes where we tend to work in the cybersecurity arena, and that captures the information technology and industrial control systems. So we took this model and applied the 4-step cycle across each of these tiers. And so in each tier, you execute on that 4-step process, and it provides, there's a series of activities that occur and outputs that come out of that cycle. And those outputs oftentimes feed in as inputs to the next tier, and then also feed back up to the higher level tiers to reinform the process. So that's the general high level overview of the risk management process that we've developed. So what's the value proposition? What we've really done is we're trying to create that consistent, repeatable, adaptable process that will be usable by all of the electricity sector organizations. And it emphasizes alignment with the mission and business objectives of the organization. So we're not trying to look at cybersecurity for the sake of cybersecurity. We're looking at cybersecurity for the sake of the mission and business objectives, which is keeping the power on, which is what that's what we're advocating for. That's what our mission is. So we tried and aligned it very well with that. So it allows for gap identification within the organization, so you can figure out areas where additional research or additional policies or procedures may be required. It improves resource allocation then through the gap identification, and it allows for identification of opportunities for greater efficiency within the organization. And overall, the process, implementation of the process is going to allow for overall cybersecurity within the organization and improving that cybersecurity. One of the key aspects is that looking at the risk management model in the organization is connecting all of those tiers so that all of them are talking to one another, which sometimes that's not occurring in organizations. So the overall, this will lead to improved communication and cybersecurity, the goals, needs, and requirements amongst all the stakeholders. We're hoping that everybody within the community will begin to adopt the risk management process, so it'll allow not only better communication within the organization, but also facilitate communication amongst all the various stakeholders, to include those that aren't actually responsible for delivering electric power, but nonetheless have an interest, such as the states, federal government, Congress, and then those trying to provide services to industry, such as vendors. So this common process, we believe, will be really helpful in improving the dialogue in cybersecurity amongst these stakeholders. So I think that provides a pretty high-level overview, but a little bit of an understanding of what's been developed thus far. We went out in October for a public comment period. That was our first public comment period, and we received a good number of comments, over 100 from 30 different folks. And we're now in the process of rewriting that document based on those comments, and hope to kick out another draft for the final public review in the next month or two. And we're aiming for publication of the final document in the spring. So I've provided here the web link so that you can keep up to date on the progress of the initiative, and we're going to be updating that again this week. And that's where we'll provide more information once we go for the final public comment period. So I think we have time for a few questions.
Yeah, I think we have a time for at least one question, and one of them we're seeing on the board is, will the proposed process be mandated to the utility industry or just advisory?
No, that's a great question, and as Bill already stated, we're not a regulatory agency, so we're not taking that approach. What we're trying to do is develop the tool, and we're hoping that industry will utilize it, and that's why we bring in the private sector to advise on this, to ensure that what's developed will be useful to industry and that they'll find it of value, and that based on that value proposition, they're going to utilize it. And so that's the way we're going to move forward with this. We're primarily providing the tool and some outreach and education on it, and we hope that the industry will find it of value and therefore adopt it. So it's in no way intended to be a mandatory requirement.
Thanks, Matt. And I'm sure as more questions come in, we're going to hold off at the end to answer. We'll try to answer at least one of the questions right after the speaker, and then to save the rest of the questions for the end, just to make sure we have enough time for all the speakers to get through the material. So thanks, Matt. At this time, I'd like to introduce Anthony Lucas. Hold on a second. What's that?
Rhonda's next.
Oh, Rhonda. Oh, we already got. I'm sorry. Yes, I'd like to introduce Rhonda Dunphy. I'm sorry about that. She'll be talking to us about Smart Grid Cybersecurity Specialist Certification Guidelines. So, Rhonda, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon. As Bill said, I'm Rhonda Dunphy. I work on control systems security within Bill's office. And the title is a little bit misleading for the Smart Grid Cybersecurity Specialist Guidelines. That is what we started out to do. Then we recognized that the material that we developed may or may not actually be turned into certification. As you see, as I talk through the process, we're leaving that up to the subject matter expert panel and the advisory board to decide should this actually be turned into true certifications. But in the meantime, what we would like to do is to develop the job competency model and all of the elements, the job roles, the tasks within that. So as you can see, the purpose is to really try to define what a cybersecurity operator out there doing their day-to-day work in the utilities in a smart grid environment, what exactly are they doing? We couldn't answer this from DOE's perspective, and a benefit that we saw to industry was that it would allow a hiring manager to take a look at that job description. It would allow a manager in a utility to be able to develop a learning plan to take a cybersecurity specialist from entry level up through journeyman up to an expert level. So that whole perspective, understanding what that expertise was at all those different levels, how to put together teams to bring in all of those skills, and not look at just the technical skills, but also the softer skills, whether it's problem solving or working within a team to look at some of these cybersecurity issues. So I'm going to walk through an example, a couple examples. You'll see some screenshots, more for eye charts, and I'll explain those. But essentially, a measurement model for assessing knowledge, skills, and abilities. So the project is broken up into 3 phases. We're almost all the way through phase 1, scheduled to complete in March. But this was really to start with those foundational cybersecurity skills. And a lot of work has been done through the subject matter expert panel that I'll talk about next. But then we're going to ask industry at large for their opinions, especially one of the areas that we're looking at that AK will talk about later, the Smart Grid Investment Program. A number of utilities have been working with DOE, so they understand from a practical sense, a day-to-day sense of what cybersecurity elements have been needed. The next phase is going to be the critical incident analysis phase. So to take what was done through that survey information and to sort of to actually use it in a laboratory to test it and to analyze that. So from the survey to actually working in a laboratory, and then the third phase is that final report, and also to take the recommendations from the subject matter expert panel and the advisory group on where to take this information next. So the next slide talks about the subject matter expert panel, and in working with both Pacific Northwest National Lab and NBISC, we brought together a set of nominations, and then you can see who the panel members are, or maybe not so much, but a mixture of government, industry, from the research community, from the vendor community, just trying to get a wide mix of subject matter experts, and then to have the chair and the vice chair really direct the efforts of this group to provide the energy and the focus into this. And Justin Searle from Utilitech and Scott King from Sempra Energy are our chair and vice chair. And then we also have an advisory group to provide a higher level strategy. So really getting down to the competency modeling process and I'll show you some screenshots, some examples of where this subject matter expert panel, the steps that they've gone through so far. So in trying to tackle this, NDIC had looked at several other processes, including penetration testing, but this was the first attempt to look at an applied engineering, an actual industry. So the competency modeling process involves trying to take a look at what a successful expert, all the way down to journeyman and down to the entry level, what they need to know and to do, what tools they need to be familiar with, what knowledge, skills, abilities, and as I said before, not only from a purely technical sense, but also looking at problem-solving skills, leadership skills, the whole gamut for what this person needs to do to accomplish their job. On the next slide is where this subject matter expert panel just started brainstorming using a tool called Vivo Insight to help brainstorm, generate ideas on all the different vignettes or scenarios that a cybersecurity specialist working out there in the utilities might have to undergo. So I realize it's probably hard to see. Some examples are individual smart meter denial of service. One is a phishing attack directed toward an entry-level position / new account in an effort to obtain valuable login / network access. So just some of the typical things that a cybersecurity specialist might see, those vignettes or scenarios. With the tool, and really what NBIC has said is that in working with the tool in a live, real-time environment was really the most productive rather than an asynchronous type. So they've identified 109 vignettes in just 20 minutes, just brainstorming together. So the next step, once they had all of these different vignettes, the panel started elaborating on the vignettes, sequencing, trying to take a look at all the steps involved in a certain vignette. In the next slide, they took a look at all the different job roles that would answer the question of who would be performing that activity in the vignette. They then categorized the functional roles, and one of the areas DHS and NIST have undertaken is the NICE project for cybersecurity education. So this project was able to use the framework for information assurance as developed by NIST and DHS. So some of the job role categorizations are operations or digital forensics, test and evaluation, just many of the different job roles for this. Part of the research that was done was to take a look at the job openings that are available right now currently. Some of those might be like an advanced meter security specialist, a security administrator, intrusion analyst, a penetration tester, all the different job openings that are available for utilities with smart grid environments. So the task of the panel was then to take all of those different job roles they had identified in the previous step and to take a look at the frequency and importance of those roles across all those many vignettes. The three that were narrowed down as critical in the largest number of situations were incident response specialist / analyst, intrusion analyst, and security operations specialist. So those were the three area job roles of focus. The panel then went through several steps of goals and identifying tasks. And in the next slide, you'll see that an example of how that panel did that task identification through voting. So through this group decision support tool, the panel, you know, after brainstorming all the responsibilities for those 3 top job roles, they took a list of all these action verbs, and it's for the Bloom taxonomy for designing training programs. But they generated over 500 tasks that these 3 roles must be capable of performing. So they are actually able to do it in less than 4 hours, but, you know, still a huge amount of work required by the cybersecurity specialist. And this is just what the opinion of the subject matter expert panel has come to at this point. So next slide. The next step will be to finish up on this task, this job description survey, and we would like to push it out to the industry at large. We're looking for 2,000 survey participants, expecting about a 10% completion rate. But as you can see from the progress to date, that's where we're up to. We're looking towards the end of January to actually push out a survey, and then the analysis will begin of those survey results. Next slide. Just to summarize very quickly, this is to better define the job description of a day-to-day cybersecurity specialist working in the utilities, working in a smart grid environment. We only have the interim preliminary report right now. After development of the final survey that should go out at the end of January, like I said, we're looking for participants in the survey, people that have been doing these jobs on a day-to-day basis. And then the panel, it will be up to the panel to advance the measurement model. And are there any questions?
Yeah, Ron, I have one question that I'd like to ask now, and if there's any that come in after that, we'll address at the end. Do you know at this moment, and this is a question from Michael, do you know at this moment if the qualification process to get involved in this is restricted to U.S. citizens? Would you have to have a security clearance? Have you gotten to that level yet?
And this actually is a project that we would like to expand internationally. We've gotten some interest from our allies like the UK, Canada. So it's totally unclassified, something that we would like to, like I said, involve our partners and allies in, because we recognize that this is it's a global issue, and especially in defining the job description, that we will keep it at an unclassified level.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rhonda. Next, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to Anthony Lucas. Anthony is going to be discussing our emergency preparedness, response, and restoration activities. Anthony, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Bill. Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Anthony Lucas. I'm the Federal Program Manager for ISER ESF 12, Emergency Support Function 12. For those that may not be aware, the Emergency Support Function 12 is under the National Response Framework, which is basically a plan or framework that basically illustrates how the federal government will respond to catastrophic disasters or catastrophic events. And under that is ESF 12. And ESF 12 is basically energy. It's the Emergency Support Function for energy for 12. And how we got to 12 is basically we were just in a room or came in at the room at the wrong time and ended up being number 12 in the queue, if you will. One of the things that I want you to take away from this quick presentation is energy coordination, communication, hopefully equals solutions. That's one of the things that we really try to reach when we're deployed during major events, is basically helping find solutions to mitigate or prevent or reduce the time it takes to restore the energy infrastructure. And that's one of our goals as we're going through. And if you've ever been in an event where you have power outages for more than 4 or 5 hours, you can probably understand the impacts that it can have, not only to you, but to your community and to the business base within your communities as well. And of course, to the private industry owners and operators as well. The first slide is just showing you energy preparedness and what DOE does as far as prepares and responds to energy events. Now, under the National Response Framework, there are basically 2 events. There's a FEMA Stafford Act event, which is basically a presidential declaration for a major event such as Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Ike, Gustav, etc. And then you also have non-Stafford Acts such as the blackouts, the BP oil spills that didn't necessarily fall under a Stafford Act declaration, but it did still need a coordinated federal effort outside of a Stafford Act. And we also played a coordinating role in that measure. ESF 12 did not, but the whole of DOE did in reference to helping mitigate that situation as well. We also respond to physical infrastructure and cyber events as well, such as Rhonda had mentioned earlier. But this is basically, that still most of the time is considered under the purview of the private industry and not necessarily the federal government. If you look at the next point, there's the health, which is basically stands for the high impact, low frequency events as well. We do prepare for those, and we do work with FEMA, DHS, and other agencies to prepare policies and plans for the federal government to be in preparation for these types of events, such as pandemic, solar storms, etc. And of course, national security special events such as the presidential inauguration and nuclear summits. These are all some of the things that we do here at DOE in preparation for energy emergencies or energy or events that affect energy infrastructure. Next slide, please. Why is this important? As I mentioned earlier, energy coordination and communication is key because within the energy infrastructure, you have a lot of different players that play a significant role in protecting and restoring the infrastructure. Most of the infrastructure, as you're probably aware, is basically owned and operated by the private industry, co-ops, and municipalities. They are basically the primary role, they have the primary role and responsibility of restoring the infrastructure within their jurisdiction. When it comes to a point where they're having difficulties restoring infrastructure because of policy, because of mitigation issues, because of logistics, that's when DOE or ESF 12 plays a significant role in helping mitigate those issues as much as we possibly can. But a lot of that has to happen before the event. That happens in the pre-event state, and that's where we do a lot of local exercises through our state energy grants and other factors to help the states and the private industry start planning for these events ahead of time and helping create those coordination nexuses, if you will, with the federal, states, and locals. Yes, I believe did someone have a question? Great, I'll keep moving on. And that's important because we need to have those relationships built before an event happens, because the worst thing that we found out that can happen is if you try to build these relationships during an event, you're already behind the power curve. You're falling behind, and there's a lot of coordination that's not taking place. And as you see here, in the next couple of slides, you will see the coordination and the various levels of coordination that has to take place. Next slide, please. These are some of the authorities and why it's important for us at DOE to be a part of this, because we are directed by the President, we're directed by certain other directors and authorities and Department of Energy organizational acts to help prepare the industry for these types of events. And this is just, you can just use this as a platform to look at later on in your review of this PowerPoint presentation. And if you have time, by all means, look at all the acts and try to delineate some of the authorities that other agencies have. Next slide, please. As I said, ESF 12, typically, some of the typical activities that we do, when you have an event that happens, the first thing people want to know is what's going on, what's happening, how long is our power going to be out, when do we get it back up? And it's a very tense and very pressure environment for the utilities as it is for the states to get energy back up as soon as possible, because there's the money, of course there's an economic point of contact that you got to look at, and there's also the life and safety that people are relying on energy and electricity. So, for example, you have key critical assets such as hospitals, such as water treatment facilities, plants, and et cetera, that require energy to be able to provide the resources to the general public. And these are some of the things that we have to take into consideration when we're working with the private utilities to ascertain what needs to be a priority and what is the prioritization that the states and the utilities need to be focusing on. Now, a lot of that basically is already taking place with the utilities, where they're already working with their state counterparts and the local counterparts to determine what are their priorities, what are their issues that they should be concerned with within their jurisdiction, so that they can be better prepared for the next emergency. One of the other things that we try to do is removal of barriers for the private sector as well. When they do, for example, if there's a cross-border initiative or if there's problems with getting crews from one location to the other, we help facilitate that through the coordinated effort and the relationships that we have with the State Department, Customs and Border Protection, DHS, and other counterparts that play a role in this. One of the other things that's very important that we do as well is serve as a federal focal point for the energy response and restoration issues. As you can probably be aware, that there are a lot of utilities and a lot of federal entities that have a stake in wanting to know what the energy infrastructure looks like during and after an event. If all the federal entities started coordinating with one utility that may be potentially impacted, they can become what we call Fed fatigue, if you will, get Fed fatigue, if you will, because you have multiple agencies calling one entity trying to get the same information. What we try to do is we try to be the end-all, where that the federal family can come to us, the Department of Energy, ESF 12, to be able to push out and synthesize that information to them and help analyze the information if that is needed as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, energy coordination communication is important. As you see here, the slide basically is this is just a high overview of who we are communicating with. We're communicating with FEMA, other sector-specific agencies, all the states, energy association commissions, public utility commissions, foreign nations, media, and energy owners and operators. That's important because if you go to the next slide, during an event, this becomes more of an issue, because if you don't have those communication and those points of contacts already identified, you're going to be behind, once again, the curve of trying to help restore the energy infrastructure. This is basically, this PowerPoint basically just shows you the government response and coordination structure that is basically set up as of now. This probably will change in the next year because of the new PPD-8, Presidential Policy Directive 8, that's being implemented as we speak. But right now, this is basically the government response and coordination structure that you see here. Now, if you look at it, you see that DOE ESF 12, we have representatives normally at the state EOC or at the GFO, at the Response Coordination Center, and at the National Response Coordination Center. And of course, that's where you have all your federal families within the agency or federal departments that are there helping coordinate the national response. And then, of course, if you go one level down, you have the Regional Coordination Center, which is helping coordinate the regional issues, if you will. And then the Joint Field Office is basically more of a local field office for your communities and states, basically to field and push information and requests for federal assistance. And of course, you have the State Energy Operations Center. And that's a very important point within the communication process, because the states are basically setting the priorities for their energy infrastructure impacts within their state. They're the ones that's basically really working with the private utilities and the owners and operators of the utilities, if you will, to help coordinate the response and restoration for a particular large-scale event. Now, that's something I want to emphasize. This is basically a structure that is set up for large-scale events that's normally, like I said, at a Stafford Act declaration or presidential declaration, such as hurricanes, earthquakes, and large-scale events that requires a federal coordinated effort. Once again, that's basically one of the important things I want you to remember in this brief is the coordination and communication that has to happen because of the various stakeholders that have a role to play within the energy response and coordination. The next slide is basically, if you can really read the slide now, is basically just an overarching view of all the entities, all the players that play, not just within DOE, but within the states and within the local regions as well, and the importance of coordinating energy restoration for a Stafford Act or a non-Stafford Act event. With that, I think that concludes my brief. Bill?
All right, thanks, Anthony. Before we switch over to AK, we haven't gotten any questions yet in particular to that brief. There are a couple of them that popped in regarding my talk on reliability, survivability, and resiliency, and I'll take this time momentarily to address a couple of them. One of them was defining RSR, and can the definitions that we use for reliability, survivability, and resiliency, number one, are there formal definitions for those words? And the second piece is, if we can define them, then would it be fair to use them as a metric for success? I will tell you that from where I sit, they're very general terms. These are documented, and we capture these in our annual report and our annex to the NIPP, the National Infrastructure Protection Plan. And so we do use them, and they are there, and they are defined. Regarding a metric, I would say that, in some industries they do. I mean, we have a metric for reliability of the electricity grid. There's a percentage number. Now, is that the same definition that I would use as reliability when looking at oil, gas, and electricity across the board? No. So, yes, we have some definitions. Yes, we've consulted some formal documents. To some degree, we've used those, so we're not creating our own definitions. But when it comes to using them as a metric, I'm not so sure. I would have to give some more thought to that. The second one was from Wendy, and she had a question. I'll actually read her question. Since DOE has defined security as including reliability, survivability, and resiliency, does DOE believe that those officials in high-level organizations, I'm assuming she means in industry organizations, who have these responsibilities, should they have extensive knowledge of the electric sector or the site that they are managing? I would have to assume that if they're a high-level individual within those companies, they already have that. But at a minimum, these folks ought to have influence into making these corrections and fixing those things that are identified. But I think it should be noted, though, in looking at reliability, survivability, and resiliency, we're talking to two very distinct parts of the organization. We're talking to the security folks as well as the operational folks. And there needs to be an education at all levels. I think there certainly is a desire and an interest and an intent to correct things and to make things right and to do the right things. But there's a lot of players involved. And so there are some disconnects. And part of what we try to do here in the federal government is try to connect these dots that we see out there that are disconnects. So I hope, Wendy, that in some way I was able to address your question.
Bill, there is a person on the attendee list who has raised their hand and wants to get the audio, so I'm going to unmute for a moment and ask her. So Irene, go ahead. You had a question on the phone?
I have a question about certification. Actually, two. First, is my impression correct that the certification is geared more towards response than prevention? And a second question was, I had a feeling that talking about security certification, people assumed that people who will be getting certification have all the operational knowledge they need and need help with the security side. But there are people coming from the security side who have IT security experience and who will need operational knowledge to be able to deal with the smart grid, because smart grid is not an IT thing. So the question is, are there any plans how to prepare those people to properly protect smart grid?
Thanks for the questions, Irene. You know, those are big questions, and yes, I think one of the unique things about this that sometimes is forgotten is the mix of the operational side and the IT side into control systems networks, or trying to understand the operational aspects. We're trying to meld those in this cybersecurity job performance model. I don't think that we can address bringing the operational aspects to the IT specialists at this point. We're hoping to bring together the overall set of cybersecurity skills, and it is focused on the smart grid environment. So it should capture those operational aspects. Like I said, the survey should be available towards the end of January. I can't really say that 100% that we'll address all of those operational needs into the IT specialists that are entering the field, but we recognize the importance of having those cybersecurity specialists out there with that operational knowledge.
Okay, and again, we got one more presenter, and that's AK. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to AK to talk about the smart grid investment grants, and then we'll get back into the questions and answers for any other questions that we have. So AK, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. This is Akhilesh Shiva from the Office of Electricity in the area of the smart grid investment grants. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. One thing I'd like to emphasize from the onset is that the topic that I'm planning to cover today by no means cover the work that is being done by the department in the area of workforce development, interoperability, and transmission planning, to name a few. The Smart Grid Investment Grant is a industry-government collaboration effort, one of the major ones that has been taken since the inception of the industry to modernize the utility industry's infrastructure. In order to cover a little bit of the history, to get everybody on the same plane here, the investment grants were, the act was signed by the President in February of 2009, and there are two components of the funding. One is the Smart Grid Investment Grant Program, which is about $3.4 billion. And the main emphasis here is to implement existing technologies. And by that, what I mean is that it is possible to have different components that have been well tested, but there could also be a possibility where they are being integrated for the first time, and that's where the challenge is for the utilities and the recipients. The second component is the Smart Grid Demonstration Project, which is $620 million. And here we are focusing on the development of future technologies. So there's higher level of risk associated in the second component. Both of these programs are being administered by DOE in the Office of Electricity. And when these grants were being envisioned and there was a discussion going on the government side, there was a great emphasis from the White House, the executive branch, in terms of two items. One was in the area of cybersecurity, and the other one was in the area of consumer behavior studies. And I'm going to cover both of those in the future slides here. So going back to the chronology, in April 2009 is when the funding opportunity was announced, and the responses were due back in August of 2009. DOE went through a very elaborate and comprehensive evaluation process where we had a technical merit review component, and then we looked at also the cybersecurity component of the application. And this was to respect the emphasis that was coming from the White House in terms of the cybersecurity concerns. The selections were announced in 2009 late, and then we went through the procurement process to get the grants in place by middle of 2010. At this point in time, we had 99 recipients who were awarded the investment grants and 32 demonstration projects. As the project started, we went through the preparation of the different plans and cybersecurity. Yes.
Sorry to stop you, but there are cell phones that are getting close to the speaker, and there's interference that's occurring from your room there. So Is there any cell phones? Yeah, and that's what's causing this noise in the presentation. So if you could move the cell phones away from where the microphone is, that would be really good.
Okay. Has the problem been addressed?
Yes, it's a lot quieter now.
Okay, great. Thank you. So as we started the projects, there were 3 different types of plans that were being developed by the recipient. One was the project execution plan, the cybersecurity plan, and the metrics and benefits plan. And then once these plans were approved by the department, we started to do the site visits, and the objective there was to meet the team, because until now, all the dialogue had been done virtually. And so we completed 94 site visits for the investment grants, and 40+ site visits have been completed for the demonstrations. Now, you may be wondering that if we have 32 projects, how come we have 40+ for the demonstration project? For some of the projects, we had multiple site visits. So as of right now, the department has disbursed $2.0 billion for the SGIG projects, and about $212 million, which is about a third, for the SGDP projects. The one thing I'd like to emphasize at this point is that the $2 billion is the government share, and pretty much there's an equal share coming from the industry. So if you want to put that in a proper perspective, it's about $4 billion worth of infrastructure improvement that has already taken place. And as you know, the projects are in various stages of implementation. So not all of the infrastructure has come live yet, because the project is in various stages of implementation. I have a few stats here just to give you a feel in terms of what kind of equipment has been installed to date. We have over 9 million smart meters. We have direct load control devices. We have automated capacitors. I'm not going to read all the numbers here. You can see it on the slides. And we have PMU, the phase of measurement units, and the concentrators. So there is an enormous amount of equipment that is being placed in service. And all this is also related to the behind the scene work that goes on in terms of IT-related work and the planning and design and testing of the equipment. Now, one other thing I'd like to emphasize is that we have accomplished is the amount of work that has gone into the Smart Grid website. It was revamped earlier, or mid last year now, and new material has been added since then. So that is your best source to go to in order to get the latest information that is emanating from these programs. Now I'd like to address the highlights of the cybersecurity and emphasize that DOE is very well aware of the sensitivity around the cybersecurity plans, and we are handling all this information that is coming to us in an appropriate manner, and that is to allay any concerns that you all may have in terms of how the data is being shared internally and so forth. The cybersecurity SMEs participated in the site visits, and they have reviewed the progress in this area, and the site visit reports are being prepared and will be shared with the recipients. In August of last year, the department held a invitational only cybersecurity information exchange, and there we met with the grant recipients to share the results of the site visits. It was a very informative session. The feedback that we got from the recipients was very positive. And late last year, we distributed 2 products as a result of the Chicago session. One was the tools and resources for smart grid cybersecurity. It's a compilation of what already exists out there. One of the things that we heard loud and clear in Chicago was that people are really searching for information, what has already been accomplished. There's a desire to get it readily shared in the industry so that we can all derive the benefit of it. And the other one we sent out in December was the needs and gaps which is a crosswalk summary based on the interaction of the cybersecurity information exchange. The other area that has been very much active is in the development of metrics and benefits, and we have a team which has been very actively interacting with all the recipients as a follow-up to the metrics and benefits plans that were approved in 2010 and earlier in 2011. And here the goal and the vision is for the recipients to report their metrics to measure and gauge the impact of the new technology that is being implemented out in the field. So we have items like peak and overall energy consumption reductions, improvement in operational efficiencies, and the reliability improvements. So it's a very wide area. The challenge here, as you can very well imagine, is that the different recipients have different methodologies depending on the distribution system configuration or the transmission configuration. The impact would be different. And so it's a very methodically planned approach to try to gauge and measure the impact of all this work. The first impact metrics were submitted by the recipients in October, and at this point the department is reviewing the data that was provided, and in conjunction with the help from the recipients, we are continuing with that work. The Smart Grid Demonstration Program, the recipients will also submit their performance on technology as well as the impact on the grid function, and that work is also continuing on a parallel path. The last slide that I have is in the area of consumer behavior, and as you can very well imagine, it's technology, process, and people that it all boils down to, and it is imperative that the new technology is well accepted by the consumers. So there are 11 rigorous consumer behavior studies that are ongoing, and the objective here is to see the response to dynamic pricing tariffs. As you know, Smart Grid is implementing technology for the first time, which is going to enable and empower the customers in terms of providing them with their usage information. How well that is assimilated by the consumers is going to be a key in determining what kind of impacts the reductions and the energy and demand reductions will achieve. So here you're talking about a standard approach of a control and treatment group. We're going to have the randomization of the selection bias to look at, and the demographic information to keep an eye on. And this process is going to take a little longer because, as you can see, that once the technology is implemented, there's going to be a lag time for reaction and what have you. So for the next 4 years, the recipients will be providing us with their details of their experimental approach and the results and what have you. DOE is also going to conduct a cross-study analysis after all this data is made available associated with the customer acceptance and the retention, because retention is also a key in terms of how well the customers first react to it and whether they are willing to continue in the program or not. So we have the start of the journey. It is a very challenging set of projects that we are dealing with in collaboration with the industry. Lastly, the thing that I'd like to emphasize is that it is truly a collaboration effort. Failure is not an option, and we are counting on our industrial counterparts to support this effort for the good of the cause. And that's all I have.
Thanks, AK. One question for sure that jumped in here was regarding jobs. It's a loaded question, AK, but how many jobs do you think to date the Smart Grid investment grants were able to create? Do we have any numbers on that?
I don't have the number right in front of me here, but we are collecting this data on a monthly basis, and there are multiple challenges that we face on job count, the easiest one to capture is from the recipient itself, where based on the work that is being performed, they compute the number of jobs that they're creating, or the number of jobs that are being retained as a result of this work. That's an easy one to capture because everybody can count and report. The one that is kind of a nebulous one is how much effort and work and the number of jobs that is being created by the subcontractors and the vendors and the support industry folks. And that's where we do not have very good numbers. So as you know, with a total of $4 billion worth of investment going in, the number of jobs created is substantial or retained is substantial. I don't have a number here that I can readily quote you, and perhaps we can look into it and provide the answer in written form later.
Okay, great, AK. And also, there's a question: would the SGIG resources be eventually accessible by the public via certain registration and qualification process?
That is correct. The vision is to have a widespread distribution of those products and tools and resources so the industry can benefit.
And a question just came in on whether or not the Smart Grid investment grants are still available. New ideas?
Unfortunately, this was a one-time funding. I'm sure everybody's aware of the current budget situation. So right now, the entire $3.4 billion allocation has been committed, and there is no more funding available for new ideas at this point.
Thanks, AK. And Rhonda, I believe there was a question?
Yes. There was a question about consideration for facilitating and helping the educational institutes to offer the security training at a college or master's level. And yes, as part of the outreach and communications, the working with academic institutions is definitely part of this effort. Through this job description model and through the whole process, we'll be able to establish learning objectives and also to develop situational judgment questions for assessment instruments. That's why we were headed down the road of certifications from the beginning. And just as the use cases are important, the misuse cases are also important for testing. But like I said, it's not certification right now. It's really to define that job performance model, and then the college institutions and programs such as the DHS, NIST, NICE effort will have this information also to establish those learning objectives.
Thanks, Rhonda. A couple questions popped up there that I'll go ahead and try to address. Wendy asked a question concerning DOE's plans to address the lack of trained power engineers with the U.S. utility industry. Because the lack of this, as we all know, we're having a shortage of this skill set, and that could potentially impact RSR. And that is a great question, and it's a great observation. We all know that is something that's not, at least from my office, is not being directly addressed. There have been some discussions outside of my office in other larger forums, and how do we go out and get this message out to academia. Our office has been invited to more and more universities to be part of panels to discuss what we do and the need to have well-trained engineers at these facilities because of the new challenges we're facing that goes just beyond typical electric engineering. But now you're bringing in a whole different threat dynamic to the industry. And so getting the word out to kind of energize some young folks to get into this line of work, because it's not just about electric power anymore. There's much more to it. And so we're hoping that we'll be able to get some interest and energize some of the young people getting into this field. So I appreciate that comment. Also, Robert asked a question regarding the likelihood that disruptions of electric power would be a likely tactic in both cyber warfare and future mainstream global conflict. And it's a two-part question, and I'll address that one first. Certainly there's evidence that can be the case. It's just the way it is across the globe. Infrastructure has always been a target, There's no reason why we can't assume that that could be the case here, should someone want to do that. Now, whether they attack it via cyber means or whether they use physical means, they can certainly do it both ways. So we're not sitting out here as an island by ourselves without any concern that this could really happen to us. Certainly it can. There are certainly people capable of doing that. And the second piece of that is how much of this concern or idea is shaping the cybersecurity and electric power security activities. I would say pretty much all of it is shaping that. That's what we're worried about. We're worried about, and I've been in several forums in other countries, and I've asked some of the similar questions that people ask me is what keeps you up at night. And, it's interesting we get the same kind of answers and concerns that we have. We were already under cyber attack. Certain elements of the industry and the sector are getting pulsed on a daily basis. Some know it, and some don't know it. And what concerns us more than anything is the advanced persistent threat that could be out there right now from a very sophisticated hacker who is already in systems right now as we speak, collecting data, exfiltrating proprietary information, and just setting the stage for when they want to launch something like this. So the threat is real, our concerns are real, and certainly that is shaping the direction that we're going in. Let me read through some of these other questions that are coming in. Does DOE have existing ties with academia to enable internships, and or will it be possible to use existing resources to support or create such programs? I will tell you that there are internships already within the Department of Energy. We're always wide open to more. Now, as far as the specifics about what universities, if there are certain numbers or certain types of universities or certain ones by name, I don't have that information readily available to me. I'd have to go to our Human Capital Office who manages the intern programs. And let me see. I think at this moment, that's all the questions that we have. Erfan, unless you had some other questions on your end, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I'm looking at a few of them. The question from Chris Blask, did you answer that?
Yes.
And then Larry Bartow asked, did recent hacking of a government official? I don't know.
I don't know what that is. That's not a question.
Official's number have any effect? Oh, okay. He asked it in two parts.
Oh.
Do you have any information on this?
I'm not sure. Does anyone here know what he's talking about? Yeah. I've got to say that I'm not sure I know exactly what he's talking about.
Okay.
Or no one around the table does either. So I'd probably have to have a little more clarification on that.
Okay, not a problem. And let's see. We still have about 15 minutes, a little less than 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do is, as people come, here's Jessamine Lee is asking, what kinds of sensors have been installed on the grid? Can you talk about them some more?
There are various different types of sensors that have been installed. You got phasor measurement units on the transmission system to collect data. On the distribution side, you have sensors to detect faults. There are intelligent relays in terms of the computing the distance of where the fault is, how far the fault is from the breaker. So there's a variety of sensors that have been installed throughout the distribution and transmission system.
Okay, very good. I do understand from time to time people have been losing their audio on the computer. Certain people have been writing, so I will open a ticket with WebEx and get to the bottom of that. So I apologize for any inconvenience there. And what I wanted to do, did you have a question, Rhonda?
No, she's already addressed hers.
Okay. All right. There's another question from Michael Shea. He asked, there has been community choice aggregation started in U.S. Have these kinds of utility companies been on board for smart grid security issues?
I don't know what that is. we're struggling here to try to figure out what community choice aggregation is about.
Yes.
I'm not so sure I know what that is.
Yeah, okay, Michael, you may want to rephrase your question, be more specific, because I'm also not aware of this concept. John Houston asks, how does this relate to the White House initiative announced last week?
Maturity monitoring.
The maturity
monitoring. You want to talk that? Go ahead.
Sure, I'll cover that. I think the full question is, how does the risk management process guideline relate to the recent White House initiative? So I'll just briefly cover it because the development of the capability maturity model that was announced last week is very much in the early stages. So we've just begun to engage industry on that effort. Many of the folks who have been engaged on the risk management process guideline development are also engaged in that initiative. So there's going to be a lot of close coordination, and there's quite a bit of synergy, I think, between the two. They'll be very complementary of one another. So as they move down the path of actually developing the maturity model, the RMP will be one of the key documents, I think, that the group will draw from to try and develop that. And so I think they'll complement one another very well. So they're not being done in isolation. They're actually being done very close coordination with one another.
All right.
Hopefully
very good. Any other questions from the audience? Here we have Chris Blask asking, sensors and continuous monitoring extend down into the control system network as well. Does DOE have thoughts about initiatives to address continuous monitoring of the control systems that manage grid assets?
This is Rhonda. From a cybersecurity perspective, yes, we've tried to champion continuous monitoring, and it's really our R&D office that AK is part of, but Carol Hawk, Dr. Hawk does the cybersecurity for energy delivery systems. Perhaps you might invite her to participate in one of these webinars to talk about all of the different R&D projects that she can go into great detail about them and some of the initiatives, along the monitoring side.
All right, very good. Thanks, Rhonda. Michael Shea clarifies his question. He says, a community choice aggregation utility companies like Marin County Energy and San Francisco Bay Area and others, including Massachusetts and Ohio, etc., community choice or a CCG dispatches renewable energy or direct generation using the transmission and distribution facilities put in by IOUs, etc.
Okay, let's go back to the original question now that we have this background here. Could you scroll up, please?
Sure. So we are looking at, there has been community choice aggregation started in U.S. Have these kinds of utility companies been on board for smart grid security issues? So in other words, is DOE overseeing such entities and enforcing the same smart grid cybersecurity rules and regulations as they are with the other IOUs?
Yes, there are quite a few grant recipients who are assimilating the green power, and the cybersecurity plan do cover that aspect as far as the security measures are concerned. So yes, we are looking into that aspect. And the same type of standards are being applied in terms of security measures.
Okay. There are some questions that were sent to me on the chat while we were talking, so I'm going to ask those questions. One is from Rajat from UCLA. He asks, how are smart grid investments, dollar value per unit GDP, in this country compared to investments in other Western countries? What is your long-term plan, and when do you believe industry will step in and take over?
Well, those are very good questions. Let me try to see if I can answer those in part. The first thing is that the main objective of these grants has been to serve as a catalyst to start the work in the smart grid area. There are quite a few utilities who are just starting on the smart grid initiatives, and they wanted to wait to see how these projects are going to perform, how the work is going to be done, and so forth. So hopefully the SGIG program is going to serve as an example and as a catalyst for them to get started on their projects. In terms of the international aspect, our program is very open. The smartgrid.gov website is being utilized all over the world, and the folks in other countries are monitoring the progress that we are making. I don't have any numbers here to give you readily in terms of how we are faring in terms of the dollars per GDP as compared to other countries, but the implementation of the smart meters is also ongoing in Europe and other countries of Asia. So there's a heightened level of interest that we have from overseas. We have a area in the R&D department where we look at the international aspect of the projects and share information with other participants from different countries.
All right, very good. We have a few more questions following up on the question about the investments and the comparison. Rajat continues, he says, in continuation of the above question, DARPA funded the internet for quite a while until the industry took over. So he cites that as an example. All right. We have, yes, go ahead.
It is our hope and expectation that once we have established a firm footing for this technology and the benefit and what have you, and demonstrated the consumer behavior study results of the acceptance of this technology, that it will really take off, just like the internet is being utilized today.
Okay. The next question is from Karthik Kian, and he asks, what is the scope for prepayment smart meters?
It is a regulatory-related question that we're getting into now, and it's a function of how the local jurisdiction wants to address that. From our perspective, that technology has been available in Europe and elsewhere for quite some time, and is now being introduced in the States. And so we got to wait and see how well it gets accepted. From the utility side, I can see that there are definite pros in terms of prepayment, what have you, where folks can plan their expenses ahead of time and know where they stand. So I think it's still evolving.
All right. And then there's another question from Michael Shea, who asks, would it be possible for DOE to publish a white paper summarizing the grid security survey from major nations around the globe?
We don't have such a initiative that I know of. We will take into consideration, as you know, that there are a lot of risks associated with this kind of endeavor, and the session that we had in Chicago was, for obvious reason, invitation only. So we'll take that point under consideration and see what we can do in that area.
All right, very good. So I believe at this time, if I look on the chat, I'm just checking everything here. Yeah, I think we have answered all the questions. So what I wanted to do was just spend a moment and thank all our speakers today, Deputy Assistant Secretary William Bryan, and Matthew Light, and Anthony Lucas, and Rhonda Dunphy, and Akhilesh Koshiva. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. for their very informative presentations, and I hope all the audience that participated learned from this information, and please use me as the intermediary if you need to reach any of these people and pose any more questions. I'll be happy to forward it to them. These presentations, we will put them in a PDF format. We will also have a recording of this event, and a link will be sent out to the participants so you can view it later. I do want to spend just a moment before the end of the call to talk a little bit about next month's presentation. We are going to have our next call on February the 13th. It's a Monday. It's the week before the President's Day holiday. And we are going to have a presentation on the OpenADR application. And we will also have a presentation on the USNAP organization and the work that they are doing. So I just want to read quickly a brief on this for your interest. It says, Understanding OpenADR 2.0. OpenADR 1.0 has been successfully deployed in many trials by the 3 major California utility companies. However, OpenADR is not a standard. With the combined efforts of NIST, OASIS, NASP, and other organizations, a common information model was created to not only handle DR events, but also exchange of pricing information. Based on the resulting data model, the OpenADR Alliance started the commercialization of the technology by defining application profiles that are implementable, interoperable, and testable. Understand the history and the formation of the OpenADR 2.0 standard, and learn about the guiding principles of the OpenADR Alliance work. And on USNAP, it says the USNAP overview modularity to ensure a flexible smart grid. The USNAP specification was conceived to wirelessly connect thermostats to the internet for the purpose of remote control. Learn and understand how the specification has evolved to cover a wide area of now common systems such as ZigBee, Wi-Fi, Smart Energy Profile, OpenADR, to reduce the risk of stranded assets in the rapidly changing smart grid landscape. So this presentation will be done by Rolf Bienert of the OpenADR, and I'm in the process of getting another presentation organized around some policy issues with the smart grid. So I hope that you can all attend. You will be getting the notes on the upcoming call. And the March call, which will be on the 12th of March, will be held by NIST, and Marianne Swanson and Jeffrey Mazer of NIST are going to be presenting, and that will be on March the 12th. So in my note yesterday I sent out, I asked you to put a marker on your calendars for those calls, and I hope that you can join us for that. And I believe that there is one more question. Okay. I guess everyone is just saying thank you. So with that, I will bring this call to a close. I believe, yes, I'm getting a comment from John Houston thanking everyone and the presenters. So thank you all for participating. You will be getting the messages in the next couple of days for the link, as well as the PDF version of the presentation. So I hope that you will look at that and share it with other people in the industry. And with that, thank you again, Bill and Rhonda and the whole team over there at DOE. Thank you so much today. And with that, I will now end the recording